Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cup of Joe with Joe and Joe podcast. I am your host, Joe, and with me, as always, is my wonderful co-host, Joe.
Hey Joe, guess what?
Hey, what?
I love you.
Oh, mwah, many kisses, love you too.
All right, get talking. Come on.
So, Batman. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cup of Joe, episode 24.2. It is week 24, and this week we're doing something a little bit different, since there wasn't really anything coming out in the world of ongoings this week. That's ongoing comic issues. I don't know why I said it like that. That sounded pretentious. Anyway, bless me. Thank me. Yeah, so this week we're doing a more of an evergreen episode. We're just going to be going over Batman Year One. We each have a trade copy of the 4-issue run by Frank Miller and writer Frank Miller and art by David Mazzucchelli. This is from '86, I believe. Yeah, yes. I'm fairly certain in that. Yeah, I got it right. This is insane because this came out the same year as The Dark Knight Returns. Which it's like, Jesus Christ, Frank, you're making a whole bunch of real seminal Batman shit all in the same year. It's crazy. Doing so much cocaine. Yeah. So I'm leafing through it right now. It's got some beautiful art. I really dig the art in this book. It's so different from a lot of the stuff that I look at now, but I'm just like, yeah, I like this a whole lot. But so, Joe, I want to get your opinion on what you thought of this whole trade this whole trade paperback book, because this is the first time you've encountered the Batman comics origin that's really informed everything since the 80s. So what did you think of this little boy?
Well, shout out to you for giving me my own copy. I appreciate it. It was a nice little surprise.
Bless me, thank me once again.
But I've never read like an old Batman story. You know, I'm a nerd, but I've never been a full-on comic nerd like you. Like, I never understood how comics worked, where it's like, how do you just start reading comics? I now have a better understanding after rooming with a comic nerd. So, this is my first time reading an older Batman story, and I'll say right off the bat, I love this thing. I think it was awesome.
Hell yeah.
The whole package is really cool. Like, this just... the cover of it, the version we have has a bunch of like little bonus material, which I thought was really cool. This thing is super fun, easy to read, but also really interesting. And it's weird to say. I want to say it's a unique take on Batman, but it really isn't. But it just feels, it feels. It's a Batman story that doesn't really focus on Batman that much.
Nope. The main character in this book is unequivocally James Gordon, which is a trope that has popped up in a couple of other Batman books. Trying to think. I know that there are some ongoing Gotham PD books that kind of focus more so on the GCPD, but even in stuff like White Knight, they tend to focus more so on side characters to Batman. Batman is really just like a force of the comic, whereas all the other characters, the actual people that you like spend your time with and care about.
Yeah, I definitely see that. And I will say, like, so Frank Miller was the one who wrote this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I found his writing really like poetic with the way he writes stuff.
It is different. A lot of the times he like cuts things off and makes things rather short. Like there's one instance, hang on, I'm going to leaf through this real quick and see if I can find it. Because there is an instance where Barbara is like massaging James's back, Barbara being the wife of James Gordon, and while she's doing that, she talks in a very strange cadence, and I never really understood it. What's like? Read to me what she says. It's because it's all like sentence fragments.
Don't have to go to Metropolis for a Man of Steel, could use a jackhammer on your back.
Yeah, it's just real strange, and she does he does it a couple more times throughout this book. He does it a lot in the Dark Knight Returns and subsequent like sequels to that. So it's just like a weird thing. I find it a little bit weird that he does, but yeah, I can understand how like you might think it's also like kind of poetic.
And I gotta say, the art and the colors really hold up. They're to die for. I love this type of style. It's like some of the faces every once in a while they're a little like funny looking, but it works for this story and this style. I don't know if you would call it. What would you call this stylized? Like a stylized type of
Yeah, I'd call it
Yeah.
pretty stylized. It's stylized in the same way, not in the same, but in a similar way to Daniel Warren Johnson, where it's like it's a bit grittier and more simplified stuff, but it is definitely stylized.
Yeah. So everything that hits your eyeballs in this is great. But then it's the part of it, what about the part that you actually have to, read? Is the story any good? And yes. Yes, it is. And the first note I have, Joe, of one of the things that I always like with a Batman story is sometimes I feel like depending on the Batman story, a lot of times the difference between Batman and Bruce Wayne, there really isn't none. It's just he puts on armor and starts doing stuff. In this story, two very, very different personalities. And I gotta say, the Batman that's portrayed in this, really fucking scary. Like sometimes when like especially in movies or any time when they're trying to portray Batman as kind of like badass and scary, it just comes off cringy, especially when he's like fear me or I'm the dark or like stuff like that. But no, in here it comes off actually really intimidating.
Yeah, which is really funny considering the writer of this. I'm going to talk about Frank Miller for a little bit
Go for it.
because thank you, my good man Frank here. He's been the writer of such like classics as Batman Year One, Born Again. Like there's a whole bunch of Frank Miller stuff that is really seminal and really great. But then there's also a whole bunch of stuff that makes him seem absolutely batshit insane. Like how you just said, and this is what made me really think of it was because a lot of times when writers will write Batman to sound badass, he just comes off as really cringy. And in this, he doesn't. He comes off like he's a pretty, I wouldn't say well adjusted, but like he's a kind of cool character, and you're just sort of like, all right, this is I can get on board with this. Even if you don't really believe it, you're like, all right, I can get on board. I can get behind this. In in a Frank Miller sequel to this story, something that he made in the 2000s with Jim Lee on art, the god artist himself, something called All Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder. Joe, there's an infamous line that our good buddy Frank has him say, the Batman that is, where abducted him right after the murder of his parents and has kept him trapped in the Batmobile. And then Dick Grayson asks Batman, he's like, "Who are you?" And then Batman responds with, "What are you, dense? Are you retarded or something? I'm the goddamn Batman." And thus spawned the great meme of "I'm the goddamn Batman" for years to come. So it's a bit of a little bit of this, little bit of that. You know, you got some great stuff in this, and then you got some not so great stuff in that.
So this guy seems to be pretty hit or miss sometimes.
I, yes, I would agree with that statement wholeheartedly. But
Okay,
this is a
wow.
big hit. This is a
Yeah.
big hit.
Yeah. I like I said, I the name familiar to me just from now being involved in this world. But yeah, from what I got, I mean, the writing is cool. The one thing I will say also with this story, the text bubbles, really, really nice. Like, I very rarely comment on text bubbles, but like, for each person, I don't know. Like I think Bruce's is in it's in cursive,
Yes.
and it kind of looks like I would say Bruce's and Jim's kind of they remind me of like their paper. Like it's like someone actually wrote on a piece of paper and then made the text bubble.
Yes, it's very much the narration boxes are just like running internal thoughts, but it is meant to look like they're taking on notepads. Like James Gordon's one is taking on like a yellow notepad that I don't know. You'd imagine someone who like a detective would have, where like they go to some place, they open it up, and they start taking
Yeah,
notes. And then Bruce's is on. It's just like plain white, but it kind of gives me the impression of it's more of like
it's like handwritten.
nice paper. Yeah, and it's handwritten in cursive on like the nice-ish looking paper. It's a cool way to be able to differentiate. Like modern comics, like now, when I look at a lot of different issues, like say in a Justice League book where it's like you might have internal monologue from several different characters. Most of the time, same box, it'll just have a different color and like a like faint little symbol in the background to indicate like, oh, this is a Batman word box, this is a Wonder Woman word box, that sort of thing. But this one, it does feel way more personalized, especially because like the more handwritten aspect, it's like it's these characters that are writing out these thoughts, and it works so well because so much of what this book rides upon is the internal thoughts of these characters. Like you have James Gordon, who's just freshly moved into Gotham from Chicago. He's gotten a transfer. His life isn't going too well. His wife Barbara is pregnant, which he's sort of happy about. But then he's like, "God, we have to try and raise a kid in Gotham. Who in their right mind wants to do that?" And then he gets a little involved with his partner,
No
Sergeant
pun.
Essen. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's not too good, and she eventually leaves because they're like, we can't stay away from each other. And then some other shenanigans pop up with that, and then you have Batman, who's just returned from his, decade-long training hiatus, where he's gone off and learned all of the martial arts in the world and all the training that he needs, that he thinks he needs to be Batman. And then he comes back, and then he kicks down a tree in one swift motion, which I'm like, oh my god. But yeah, so it's like the characterization of these two guys are the backbone of this book. More so Jim, I'd say, but it's important. Obviously, it's a Batman book, so you should probably have a pretty good Batman too.
Yeah, yeah. Agree with all that. And the one thing I think you clarified it for me. So Barbara is Jim's wife in this. I was really confused at first because I was like, "Oh my god!" I'm like, "Does Frank have like this? About to be like some like incest stuff?" I'm like, "What the hell is going on right now?"
Oh, you thought it was Barbara Gordon as in Babs.
Yes, as like his
Yeah, no.
daughter Barbara.
No, 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 no.
Okay, yeah. I was like, oh, okay, I'm a little confused here, but they just so like did they before this story was did Jim Gordon have a wife? Was she normally called Barbara? Am I missing something here?
It's a good question. I don't know. I'm not
Okay,
as well
okay.
versed in like past Batman stories. I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to think when Barbara came around. No, when was Killing Joke? Killing Joke, I'm pretty sure was after this. I don't really remember, but I'm pretty sure Barbara Gordon existed previous to this. Whether she was his wife, like there was a Barbara Gordon senior, I don't really know. I don't really know what Mrs. Gordon's name ever was, but in this story, it's Barbara. So I'm just like, okay, and then I move on.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Just wanted that for clarification. And then, so with this story, I guess you could technically say, I mean, it pretty much is just one story throughout these four issues, but there's no really like, oh, the bad guy in this story is the Joker or Mr. Freeze. Like, it's not like that. It's very much just it's like just a big character arc describing getting an idea of getting an idea of what Bruce Wayne and Batman's characters are like, what Jim is like, what Gotham is like. Yeah, it's just a lot of background that turns out really, really well.
Yeah, it is. It is nice because like this is year one, so it's before all the crazy shit starts happening to Gotham. Like a lot of people like to headcanon it that year one occurs, and then after year one, the Long Halloween starts, which is the story. It's written by a different guy. I'm pretty sure it's Jeff Loeb that writes that story. But in Long Halloween, you get it. So there's a whole lot of there's the gangsters like Falcone and Maroni. Actually, I think it's just Falcone in that story, but they're like on their way out. They're on their last legs pretty much because so many more like costume crazies as they call them are appearing and doing a whole bunch of stuff. So year one is the bare bones beginning of Batman, where it's like, okay, you have organized crime, you have random maniacs like schizophrenics who are holding kids up with guns and doing a whole bunch of stuff like that, and the mob and crap like that. And then over time, you start to trickle in some of the other costumed heroes. Like at the very end of this, you have whatchamacallit, Gordon standing on the rooftop, and then he's like internal monologue is talking about someone who's going to be poisoning the reservoir, calls himself the Joker. And so you never see him in the story. You never see any other costumed characters except for Catwoman, and even then, it's very sparingly. But that's it. You get Batman and Catwoman in costume, and that's all. And then you start to get the idea of the broader scope of Batman stuff at the very end.
Yeah, yeah. And so I know you had mentioned it when you had first given the book to me because I had heard of Batman Year One before, but I didn't really know what it was about. Originally, I thought this was just like the way you described it to me. I thought this was just a collection of like the first couple issues of Batman. I didn't realize that it was kind of like I read the little blurb at the beginning talking about how they were trying to revamp DC characters and stuff like that, and for how for Batman they didn't just want to change the story, but maybe just give it a little like refresh. And I found that really cool. I was like, "Oh wow!" I'm like, actually, that seems really interesting because I was able to follow along with it. I mean, I have enough Batman background to understand what was going on. It wasn't like I was learning all this new stuff as I was reading it. It was kind of more. I was getting a different point of view of it, a different way to see it, and I really liked it. And the one thing I will say, and bringing it back to what you told me when you handed me it, is that the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy is definitely heavily inspired by this thing.
Ooh, yes, 100%. Like there are so many different bits and pieces. Like one of my favorite scenes when Batman is in the building and they drop the bomb on it and like try to demolish it, and then they send in the SWAT team to go grab him, and he thousands of bullets gonna do this, and he pulls out the little device in the heel of his shoe that calls all the bats to him. I'm like, there you go. That's a scene from Batman Begins right there. There you go.
Yeah, and it gave me this. It made me smile just as much as the Batman Begins scene did.
Yeah, I think I like this one better just because it's kind of like Batman trying more desperately to get his way out of something, and then he like kicks a man through the wall, like the wall of the building, and then he's like, "All right, into the cloud of bats." I grab a motorcycle and I'm out of here. I'm gone. And then I love the aftermath of it too. Where you see Selena and Holly, that are just like in a hospital, and the narration is like, yeah, everyone who was like in that crowd seeing what was going on, they had to all go get vaccinations because of all their bat bites.
Yeah, yeah, that was a nice little detail. Oh my goodness. Oh man, I'm trying. I don't really have many other notes in this, but this thing was really cool. And I originally, I like when I get a trade like this, which doesn't happen that often. I usually am the type of person where I'm like, I want 2 hours and I just want to read through the whole thing. Um, but I read this one over a couple of days. I did one issue like every day, and this thing's great. Like I could totally see myself picking this back up again later, like maybe even later this year.
Yeah, yeah, because that's the thing. It's not like I'm gonna like leaf through it and give a nice little bit of sound right there. I don't know if you can hear that or if you need headphones or
It
whatever.
was faint. It was there.
Yeah, um, but yeah, it's it is probably a little heavier on the words than like an average comic book today. But again, it's 4 issues, so it's nowhere near as long as like a standard trade today. Like Marvel tends to package them up in 5, DC anywhere from like 5 to 9, but it's very rare that you get one that's like that large. Looking at you, uh, Scott Snyder, and your goddamn Justice League books. But yeah, it's just 4 issues, and you can just breeze right through it. It's just a nice little origin that you have for the Batman character, and it's just got such iconic and great characterizations of all the different people that you've come to know and love, like James Gordon and Batman, and even some Selena Kyle stuff going on in there, and just like Commissioner Loeb as well, like a character that I've known about from a bunch of different stuff. Like I've seen him in different movies and TV shows and later comics, but seeing the way he is in this, like just like the the wrinkly old man who loves his eucalyptus cough drops, and the way of like always reaffirming what he says at the end, that little tick that he has, pisses me off. I hate that sort of shit. But it's like really good for building a character that you're not supposed to like. And it is just like a nice little thing where you can go through and you're like, all right, I need my yearly dose of Batman. And you read this and you're like, yep, got it. That's everything that I needed right there.
Yeah, that's literally it. It's everything. It's everything that you need.
Everything that you need in a nice little Batman a book. Would you be interested in like having read this? Are you interested in trying to see what else Frank Miller has done with Batman?
I was more, maybe it wasn't necessarily. I was like, oh, I want to get more Frank Miller stuff. It was more like I had thought about. I saw, they have a little advertisement for the Long Halloween on the back, and I remember hearing that one. I think I watched a YouTube video on it a long time ago, but I was like, oh, maybe I could go out and buy that or something. But at the
Highly
same time,
recommend. Long
now,
Halloween is one of my favorite Batman stories.
okay, maybe I'll get that, and then even. The way you described Frank Miller's other stuff, that it seems really like hit or miss. I don't know. It does have me interested to see. Maybe I still like it. Maybe I don't. I don't know. But I am interested in the Long Halloween, and maybe I'll do a little bit more research on my own for Frank Miller. But do you have any other recommendations for Frank Miller stuff, or if I liked this other stuff, I would like? You think?
Yeah, Dark Knight Returns, also iconic. It's like the beginning and the end of Batman in his career. Like for year one, the very beginning, the Dark Knight Returns is like the very end. Old Bruce Wayne. It's pretty different from this, I'd say, because it takes place in a different time, and but it's like still just as iconic because, again, I don't know what was in the water with Frank in '86, cocaine. But whatever it was, it really helped him get the clarity of like what these characters were like and like update them for the quote unquote modern times that they were in when they wrote this stuff. But like it's carried on into now, and it's helped to inform so much stuff now. Like the Zack Snyder Justice League movie that we watched. Zack Snyder, I guarantee, has only read Frank Miller Batman books, because I cannot see a world where that man has read, or even if he has read other Batman books, it's like the only one he cares about are the Frank Miller ones because he thinks those are just really cool.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, I will do some research on my own, and maybe if I get some of that graduation money, that's where that's gonna go. So,
Get
Joe,
that graduation bread.
we have what do we got this week? Or do you have anything else you want to say about this? I should say I shouldn't just close it right close that door on you.
Yeah, no, I'm okay. It's really, I said most of what I want to say. It is a very good origin story for Batman. You get the death of the parents. You get a wonderful character arc and story for Jim Gordon. There's a whole lot of stuff we didn't touch upon, but I think that's fine because I think anyone who listens to this should just understand it's good. And there's a lot of stuff in here that we don't touch on that works really well that you should go out and buy, like Flass, Detective Flass, that asshole. I love him. All the stuff with Selena Kyle, Bruce getting stabbed in the leg by like a 13-year-old hooker. It's wonderful. I love it. Good book. People should go out and pick it up. Much like I am going to do next week, except not with that book, but with this week's book. That's right. It is a perfect segue that you just heard. I'm trying to hang on. Actually, I can probably just do this off the top of my head. I have so next week I know for certain Batman 107 is coming out, so I got that I'm picking up. We're gonna see more of the Scarecrow stuff and like the beginnings of the what the hell was the future state? Magistrate, that stuff coming in. Then we have Swamp Thing #2, so that 10-issue mini or whatever it's called miniseries by Ram V and Perkins on art. And then we have for me, I have two indie books I'm picking. I'm going to pick up Nocturna #2. Pretty sure I talked about #1 a couple weeks back. So continuing that, and then a #1 actually, something called Geiger, which is a image book by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, the two guys who have done things like the Superman Secret Origins book. They did a bunch of Rebirth stuff, and then probably most famous at this point is Doomsday Clock, their sequel to Watchmen, which I personally adore. So they're making an indie book, and I'm like, sign me up. I'm here for it.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of good stuff. Yeah, you got a decent amount of stuff. You went from a dry week to a pretty busy week. I went from a dry week to a single comic week. I'm just picking up my Blade Runner 2029 #4, all about that Blade Runner life. Yeah, that's it for me. I'll be picking that up on Wednesday.
Wonderful. All right, so well, that said, people be sure to tune back next week if any of that sounds interesting to you, because we'll be talking about all of it. And yeah, do all the YouTube shit. Like, comment, subscribe, all that wonderful, beautiful shiznit. And with that, I shall say to all y'all, a goodbye.